sand, and the fire's been fanned. All the people demand to hear the prophet you brand.
You won't be trusted
Anymore.
That's right. You won't be trusted anymore. Legacy media, mainstream media, we're just so accustomed to your lies, but a lot of us now are seeing who you are. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, TGIF. It's Friday. It's the 2nd of May, 2025, and these are the WTF reports. I am your host, vonKleist, and I am broadcasting for the most confused, dumbed down, manipulated, and brainwashed nation on the face of the planet, bringing you information they hope and pray you never hear. They don't want you to have puzzle pieces. They don't want you to put them together and start to see the big picture. And that's why yours truly is here, to try to throw this stuff out there. I realize sometimes it's a shotgun blast of information. I go from one topic to the other, but I promise you, dear campers, these are all puzzle pieces, and it's up to you to put the puzzle pieces together so you can see the big picture. Now, I'll be honest, for those of us out here that have been doing this for a while, the more pieces you get, the more of the picture you get, and the uglier the picture gets. But I'm sorry, we can't defeat the monster unless we're willing to stare it in the eyes. Face the hypocrisy, face the subterfuge, face the propaganda, and the horse hockey that they're throwing at us 24/7. And this is why the mainstream legacy media is crumbling before our very eyes in real time. And I'm so glad to see it happening. I've been waiting for this for 30 years. As a matter of fact, that song that I used to intro the show, it's called You Won't Be Trusted Anymore. And I wrote that back in 1996. Yeah, 29 years ago. And it is focused upon the media because they have been lying to you for your entire life. And that's why it's so difficult for so many people to get off of this bandwagon and supporting anything that they say on the media. And it's sad because there are those out there that are hanging on desperately to their belief system that's based upon a lie. Now, again, if you form your opinions on misinformation, disinformation, or a lie, that means your opinion is an extension of those lies. And unfortunately, there are those who have been, having a steady diet of misinformation, disinformation, and lies. We shouldn't be surprised that when the truth comes along, it tastes funny. And some people can't handle it at all. So this is why, when you're dealing with the truth and you're dealing with an individual who's been consuming intellectual fecal matter, well, of course, you end up with stuff for brains if that's the case. But there are those out there that just can't handle it. This is why so many out there in, shall we say, one political realm, one political group out there, they slam their eyes closed, they plug their ears, and they go, la, 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 la. They don't want to have an open and honest debate. I see what's going on all over the college campuses. It's starting to turn around. But for the past several years, you go to some of these campuses, and they just don't want anybody to speak if they have an opinion that differs from theirs. Now, I'm sure you know which political group I'm talking about, but it's not too hard to figure out. But I mean, the hypocrisy and the insanity. I mean, we're trying to make sense in a crazy world. And I don't think there's any listener out there that would not agree that the world has gone absolutely bat crap crazy. And that's because we've been fed so much subterfuge. And this is why we're having so much division in this country and indeed around the world. But for example, here's a little bit of hypocrisy to think about. Okay, for all of you folks out there, if you have a job and you go to your job, and it doesn't make any difference if you're a man or a woman, if you go to a job and one of your coworkers or your boss or something like that makes a sexual comment, asks you something about your sexual life or whatever, if they make any type of a sexual comment to you, that's illegal. That's sexual harassment in the workplace. Now, this is not a liberal issue. It's not a conservative issue. It's not right or left. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's a simple fact. If you go to work and somebody starts talking to you about sex or making sexual comments, that is illegal. Can we agree on that? Okay, good. Okay, we got that down. Okay, fine. Now, why is it illegal to talk about sex in the workplace, and yet it's okay to talk about sex in a classroom to a bunch of children? How does that make sense? How does that equate? But yet this is acceptable behavior to certain groups. As a matter of fact, if you try to shut them down, they will fight you tooth and nail. They say, we have to do this. And I had a clip yesterday, and I can't seem to find it today, but there are classes now in Colorado that are sexual workshops for children, 4th grade right up to 7th and 8th grade. I mean, that's okay? That's okay? I thought that the discussion of the birds and the bees was supposed to be between the parent and the child. That's up to the parent when they want their child to start putting the puzzle pieces together. But you see, the Department of Education, oh yes, in their wisdom, they have decided that should be part of the curriculum all over the country. And this is why we're having such a problem, is because a lot of parents, there was one gentleman who took his 8-year-old daughter into the school board meeting and let her tell the school board what she was being exposed to. And that the fact that, that now that they're with this DEI policies and all this other stuff that's going on, I'm sorry, if you're a little girl, you just have to suck it up. There will be boys in the locker rooms. You're going to have to change in front of the boys. And there will be boys going into the girls' bathrooms. You have to get used to that. So you know what the father did? He said, hey, he's standing there in front of the school board. He says, how would you feel, sir, if your wife went into the bathroom and I went in there after her? And I went in there to watch her go to the bathroom. How would you feel about that? Ma'am, how would you feel, and how would your husband feel if you went into the bathroom or into the locker room at the gym and I went in there to watch you change? You wouldn't be too happy about that, would you? Boy, I tell you, you could smell the hypocrisy. I could see the nose hairs curling in that room. But this is what we have to put up with. And it's so insane. As a matter of fact, there's a couple of things that I was talking about yesterday. I mean, I was focusing heavily yesterday on the sex trafficking, the satanic worshiping that's going on, the sacrifices. This is horrendous. This is real. If you don't believe it, raise your hand. Now slap yourself with it. But this is going on across the board. As a matter of fact, here is a breaking story from WTVM. And let's see, I'm trying to figure out where that is. But anyway, well, here's the news story that came out from WTVM. Here it is.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to News Leader 9 Evening. I'm Rosalind Giles. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And topping our news, nearly 20 men arrested on human trafficking charges involving children after a sting operation in Columbus this past weekend. It was called Operation Lights Out, and it was planned months in advance in an effort to target online sexual predators. News Leader 9's Macy Woodworth explains how the operation works and shows us who was arrested.
18 individuals were all arrested this past weekend, ranging from 21 to 68 years old. This was all for child exploitation, trying to reach out to children via the internet. The Muskogee County Sheriff's Office, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, including the Georgia Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and 12 other law enforcement agencies were all a part of this successful investigation.
There were no children at harm at all in this, except for the fact that had we not been there as law enforcement working in an undercover capacity, these very same perpetrators that were arrested would have been talking to our children in our community. And they would have been talking about sexual acts and meeting up for sexual acts and exchanging pornography on the internet.
Now, Carl Sprayberry, one of the 19 individuals arrested, actually ran for a state representative seat right here in the state of Georgia. That's important to keep in mind. And these people, again, engaged in sexually explicit communication with minors, both boys and girls, we were told, on the internet. Those social media platforms ranging from all over. And Muskogee County Sheriff Greg Countryman, Brian Johnston with the GBI, including District Attorney Don Kelly, all spoke at this morning's press conference.
It takes a sick individual to want to take away a right that a child has and the freedom.
3 arrested did have an illegal alien status. They've all been arrested here in Muskogee County, and so they've been planning this for a long time. This is something that they successfully completed this weekend.
These are folks who acted They went to a specific location to meet a child, oftentimes to exchange money for sexual activity. So they acted. They didn't just look at it, they acted.
We're not going to stop until they stop preying on our kids.
And that's the way it ought to be. And I've been saying this since day one, that if you want to stop the sex trafficking that's going on all over this country, if you want to stop it, you have to get rid of the consumer of these sexual products, if you will. This is absolutely horrendous. It's got to stop. It has absolutely got to stop. And the thing is that a lot of people are they're never arrested. I mean, a lot of people, in the conservative movement right now, the MAGA movement, they're getting really disgusted with Trump and Tulsi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, rather. Excuse me. They're getting really fed up with this because we are waiting for the perp walks. We are waiting to see somebody arrested, somebody in an orange jumpsuit, somebody in handcuffs, somebody in leg irons. These are blatant crimes. And it's not just the sexual, trafficking, and it goes across the board in just about every aspect of our government that you can talk about. Now, I don't know how you feel about George Santos, but the point is that he posted up on X, and listen, he points it out. Listen to this.
So, members of Congress that should be indicted but never probably will be. Ilhan Omar, immigration fraud. She married her brother to become a resident.
Okay, I'm going to pause it. If you didn't hear it, Ilhan Omar married her brother to gain citizenship. Okay, no perp walk for her.
Yeah, true. Nobody's talking about that. Rep. Thanader from Michigan. Well, animal cruelty, identity theft, all sorts of different freaking issues that he's done with his shady past. Nothing's going to happen about that either, I believe. Has anyone found AOC's missing $1 million from her campaign? I'm waiting, asking for a few friends. Oh, and let's not forget, there's a good old Adam Schiff. He's never going to see justice. Indictment for him? Never. Oh, what about the inside traders? Like all the allegations around Pelosi, Dan Crenshaw, Nicole Malliotakis. What about them? Are they ever going to be indicted and investigated? Just curious.
Yeah. What about, what's her name? Her grandmother passed away in 2009, and for all these years, they still collect her Social Security. Oh, who is that? Jasmine Crockett. Oh, yeah. No perp walk for her either.
Oh, and then there's all the sex scandals, right? I mean, I can name them, but those are so long. But pretty much about half of Congress. Anything about that?
Oh, and by the way, all of the sexual settlements that they had, members of Congress who settled out of court because of sexual improprieties, I think to the tune of $17 million, something like that. No, they don't get to see the light of day. No, we taxpayers get to pay off the victims of these sex crimes.
Oh, and then there's Jasmine Crockett's grandma receiving Social Security payments for 11 years after she passed.
Yeah, I just said that.
It's just... Well, anyway, I just figured I'd share a few thoughts, and those are thoughts in my mind. I think it's time we start really putting metal to the pedal. Because why not?
It's time. It is absolutely time. It has to happen. There's no doubt about it at all. Anyway, let's see. There's a stand-up comedian. I don't know his name, but he basically. I'm going to share this with you. It might ruffle a few feathers, but I don't care. Listen up.
I didn't want to be labeled anti-Semitic. I didn't want to get canceled and lose my career. I didn't want to lose fans. I didn't want to offend anyone. But at a certain point, I couldn't believe those voices anymore. My heart had just enough cracks in it that the light of Palestinian resistance, struggle, and unwavering faith cracked it open. I was experiencing what happens when the internal pain from being silent outweighs the risk of speaking up in moments of injustice. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you learn the real history, you can't unlearn it. Once you get past the media and the White House focusing solely on October 7th, once you begin to look at October 6th, 5th, 4th, and the 75 years before of oppression and displacement, That's when the truth opens up. And once you look under the hood and realize our government officials are bought and paid for by the Israel lobby, you can't look at our so-called democracy the same way. Once you understand that our tax dollars are funding a genocide that we are watching in real time in the palm of our hands, I believe it is our moral obligation to adamantly protest the atrocities we are witnessing and funding, or we are complicit.
Yeah, it's a sticky wicket to get into. Now, I don't condone genocide, and I don't want to lose my country. And I don't think anybody listening to this broadcast wants to lose our country. I cannot condone what's going on in Israel. Now, the other side of the coin is that, yes, there are Muslims that are setting up shop here in the United States, and that's kind of scary because they believe in Sharia law. Now, I'm not going to stand by them, but excuse me, I'm not going to stand by the concept of having Sharia law brought into this country. That's not the way it's supposed to be. You cannot come into this country and bring your own laws that are going to, quote unquote, supersede our Constitution. If you come here, you live under our laws, and that's going to be a sticky wicket. Anyway, I realize I'm sort of bouncing around. Oh, by the way, at the bottom of the hour, I'm going to have a guest join me. George Freund is going to join me. He is a researcher extraordinaire. He's up in Canada, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with the election, with the different provinces, the attitude of Albertans versus in Quebec and Ontario, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to see if we can't sort this stuff out because, of course, President Trump has been talking about making Canada the 51st state. Now, it may not be the entirety of Canada. Maybe one of the provinces will join forces with the United States. But this is an interesting development. We're going to see how that's going to pan out. Anyway, getting back to the issue about not just Palestine, not just sex trafficking, but the right versus left argument. Now, more and more people, thank goodness, Trump has been doing a lot of good things. And again, I will say I'm not 100% behind Trump and his policies. He's got a couple of things going on that I really do not agree with. But I know what we would have had if we got Kamala Harris in there. But anyway, more and more liberals are waking up to the hypocrisy of the progressive left. Here's a young woman basically explaining how she feels about that.
One thing about Donald Trump supporters and Republicans in general. See, it used to be, I thought they were intolerant. I thought they were the ones who were racist and closed-minded. But it turns out it was the other way around. Because when I was in 2016 voting for Hillary Clinton, I was working in a small office then. The majority of the people I was working with were Republican. They had no problem with me saying that I was supporting Hillary Clinton. Not one of those people treated me any differently because I thought differently than them. But the minute you turn away from that, I don't agree with what the Democratic Party is doing anymore. I don't stand for that anymore. The minute you do that, the Democrats have a problem with it. But they're the ones preaching tolerance. They're the ones preaching acceptance. They're the ones talking about the hatred on the other side, when really the hatred is on their side. And I've also learned one thing.
That's right. And again, the hypocrisy, the stench curls my nose hairs. It's across the board. In the meantime, let me see, where was this? I'm just going through some of the posts that I've seen. In Australia, I'll tell you, Aussies, you're gonna regret giving up all your guns back in the 90s because Australia they're waking up and they're realizing they don't have a way to defend themselves and to stop this the insane push towards a global genocide by means of the hokey pokey thingy dingies. Okay, here's a gentleman that's voicing his opinion.
Don't need a mask. The mask is about compliance because they know Canadians like to do what they're told. So if they tell you have to wear a mask, next they're going to tell you have to contact trace.
Okay, I just paused. I said Aussies. I meant the Canadians. Sorry, my bad.
Then they're going to tell you have to take the vaccine. And because Canadians like to do what they're told, they're hoping that everyone just complies. And then guess what, kids? Once you take your vaccine, like a dumb person that doesn't know any better, they're going to tell you, sorry, the vaccine isn't as effective as we thought it was going to be. So now you still got to wear your mask, still got to get contact trace, still have all the restrictions and social distancing, and still take your vaccine. And then what did you get out of all of this? You got a whole year where you weren't allowed to travel, your business was closed, they took your rights and freedoms, they forced a vaccine on you, and what happened? The same amount of people died. Everything is the exact same. And now they're going to put you back on lockdown and bring it all the way till July of next year so they can do the same thing again. Bring you from July, August, and September, getting you off lockdown, but just to bring you back on lockdown again. If you idiots haven't figured it out yet, it's a perpetual cycle that you never get out of. And it's a way to take your rights, your freedoms, close your business, take your wealth. Why? So you become dependent on government. Why? If you're independent, the government works for you like it's supposed to. If you depend on the government to give you a paycheck to feed your family every month because they closed your business on you, now the government doesn't work for you, the government rules you. So instead of a middle class, we have the government, upper class, and the lower class dependents that rely on the government to survive. In other words, we have a slave class, and that's what they're trying to do. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm. And I can't help but think of the line that was in the movie V for Vendetta. You know, people shouldn't be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. That's the way it should be. But unfortunately, the American public has been, shall we say, intellectually neutered. You know, they don't think for themselves anymore. But and let me see one more comment, and then I'm going to take a quick commercial break, and then my guest will be joining me. Let me see what did this girl have to say here.
Trump held 96 rallies in 2024. CNN aired only one of those rallies live. That was the Butler, Pennsylvania rally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there. I realize it's sort of like an unrelated topic, but there's so many things that, that have hit the news wires that Americans just seem to forget about because, I mean, let's face it, we Americans have the attention span of maybe a large potato. You hear stories, for example, remember the fires in Maui? Yeah, nobody's talking about that anymore. Nobody's talking about the idea that the blue-roofed buildings didn't burn, the blue cars didn't burn, the blue umbrellas didn't burn, the blue trash receptacles didn't burn. And everybody was talking about that. We were all saying, hey, is this direct energy weapons? Why is it that blue doesn't work? And then you see people with post videos of a laser, and they put the laser on red, it burns. On yellow, it burns. On green, it burns. You put it on blue, nothing happens. Oh, so we don't talk about that anymore. Okay, so we just got to move on to another subject. See, this is how they get away with it. They throw some controversial subject, something horrible goes out there, everybody goes, oh my God, oh, blah, 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 blah. And then after about a week, something else happens. Something economic or some, tragedy or remember the Key Bridge in Baltimore? Nobody's talking about that anymore. How did that happen? Why did that happen? Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, and then there's the collision between the helicopter and the American Airlines, back in January, or was it February? I forget, a couple months ago. Everybody's saying, oh my God, what a tragedy and all that. And now it's starting to come out that it's looking like it was a deliberate hit. But not a lot of people talking about that. Like I said, people have the attention span of a potato. If we could all focus in on one issue, and I realize I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I'm all over the map on some of these topics today. But seriously, if everybody would roll their sleeves up, get involved with one issue, and dig in and do everything you can to expose it. And I don't care what issue it is. You want to talk about chemtrails? You want to talk about global warming? You want to talk about the 9/11 attack? You want to talk about this, that? Just get involved in something. There's my call. Okay, there we go. Okay, it's straight up bottom of the hour. Boy, George, you're right on time. How are you doing, sir? George Freund is my guest today. And you're up in our northern neighbor there in Canada. Where are you? You're in Ontario? Where are you? Let's see. What's going on? I don't have the audio here. Oh, what happened? Where are you? I answered that. I'm not hearing you. There we go. Okay, let's see. Let's see if this one is working. Okay. Okay, caller, you're on the air. Who are you and where are you calling from?
Okay, Dave. It looks like we're hitting balls out of the park now.
Oh, okay. Is this George?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, okay. There you go. I tried to answer it. For some reason, it didn't pick up. But Anyway, listeners...
Well, that wasn't me. That was my clone or something.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I just want to let the listeners know that George has been a researcher, and I get lots of good information from him. And he also worked on the Power Hour for many years. And after I departed from the show, or shall I say was summarily ejected from the show, George came and filled in, who was working with Joyce. How long did you do that? A lot of people have been asking. How long was George working with Joyce?
Oh, it's so long, it's hard to remember. Like, when did I start with that? Like 2006 or something? And I was doing a show in Toronto, and for some reason she picked me up. It was a big, long story. You know, I had a cameo spot Saturday nights on Mojo Radio.
Uh-huh.
And I had free speech. I could say anything I want about anything, no holds barred. And we really started rocking the house down from those 50,000 watts in Toronto. And this guy who thought he was the president, he didn't like that too much. So he called the Prime Minister of Canada, Paul Martin at the time, and told him, can't say those words, but he did swear a little bit, get that bleep, 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 bleep off the air.
Oh, boy.
And they cut my wings there. And then, ironically, Joyce picked me up after that, and at that time she syndicated in a good 40-something stations across the U.S.
I think it was more than that.
Late-night bandit radio to right across the United States.
Yeah, when we were doing the Power Hour, we were on, we had, I think it was like 65 or 66 AM and FM stations coast to coast. We were also on satellite, shortwave, internet, and XM, as I recall. So, and that was right up until 2009. So,
and then George Bush didn't have to stay up late at night.
That's right. All right. Well, I wanted to open up this can of worms. Now, you're up there north of the border, and where did you say you were again?
Toronto.
You're in Toronto. Okay. Now, of course, you just had your election, and a lot of us here in the United States are saying, oh, my gosh, Mark Carney, seriously, why did Trump endorse him? And they're trying to figure this whole thing out. There's all this talk about Canada becoming the 51st state. And some of the provinces, of course, are extremely blue, and the others are extremely red. How do you sort this thing out? Do you think that, like, for instance, Alberta, Alberta is pretty doggone conservative. And, of course, they've got a lot of the oil, a lot of the economy for Canada comes out of Alberta. What do you think is going to happen with Alberta? Do you think that they will consider a referendum and actually join the United States?
Well, they want a referendum. Their concept is to have sovereignty within Canada, if that's something that can even fly. But they are plumb mad, to say the least, and I don't blame them, because we don't have elections, we have illusions. And just like you talked about the media, people are just lured away into some Svengali effect, that they have this little ballot, and when they put it in a box or push a button, even back in the old days with George Bush, I had to think, doesn't matter what button you push, you voted for Bush. And then the Democrats took it over, and it didn't matter what button you pushed, you voted for Biden or Clinton or whatever along the same way, because they took over the companies that run the voting machines. And so you don't get a pick. It's all fixed from the minute you get in. Here in Canada, this happened with Trudeau's first election. A couple of returning officers came to me and told me the story. People voted, you close the polls, you pack up your stuff, you go in your sealed room, you turn on the TV, they announce the winners, and then they open the ballot boxes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm stupid.
Yeah,
Something wrong with that picture.
Yeah, I saw a post of a gentleman who was he had his camera, maybe his phone or something like that, and he was videotaping people coming out of the polling places with boxes filled with ballots the night before the election. And he was asking, "What are you doing with those ballots?" He says, "Oh, we're just taking them home. We can't leave them here. It's well, it's a secure location. Yeah, but we were told to take them home." And then, of course, the election happened, and there was another post by an individual. He said, look, we had 52 polling places, 52 groups of votes that weren't even tabulated yet. They hadn't even opened those boxes yet, and yet they already declared the winner. My question is, do you believe the election was rigged?
All elections are rigged. I don't think there's been a free and fair election in my lifetime. It's just before I was naive. and I didn't know that. But I learned that from the Power Hour a long time ago. We talked about that once before, about the voter news service and the fact that the results are reported to the media by a third party before anything is really known or decided. It happens universally around the world. United States or Canada, we're not special in this. And they do everything humanly possible to win. Carney was at his party after the election. He's dancing. He's singing lyrics to this song. The lyric is, "I cheated to get what I got." And then he makes all kinds of gang hand signs to people around. He wears a big red sweatshirt, and it's got D on it with 2 waves. Well, the D wave is the up-and-coming quantum computer concept, where it'll pretty much run the world and run us as human beings, because that's the object lesson of giving us these injections, is to put an operating system in our bodies so we can be hooked up to the internet. And ultimately, we'll be controlled like little marionettes by a computer. Thoughts can be put in our mind. We'll never know what's true, what's false, what's, anything, because we'll be programmed. And this is the big game plan. The other big game plan, of course, is to bring in the central bank digital currency, so everything you do is controlled by the state or the people with the mechanism levers, banksters and gangsters running governments. So let's just say, we talk about guns a lot in the United States, and here in Canada that's an issue. Well, you'll never be able to buy anything that goes boom because your central bank digital currency won't work. And if you complain or you disagree, it'll be turned off, so you have no money. There's a doctor in Alberta who fought all these health issues from the get-go, and the premier cut off his money. He got a whole bunch of money contributed to take it to court. They took it, and the account was cleaned right out. That's Dr. Makis, a hero, in my opinion, as all the other doctors who stood up for this shenanigans that was coming along, which really isn't shenanigans. It's more like orchestrated genocide of the human race. And God bless them for it. Like, they took some real beatings over all this. Dr. McCullough is probably one of the loudest voices in the United States to take on these monsters and look into real medicine and real science about what's happening. It's not political science, it's actually medical science, a big difference. And we've been fed political science to say, this is it, do what you're told. I remember probably one of the greatest victories Joyce and I ever had was when Ebola came out. And it just came out. Joyce is struggling. We don't have the answers. It's a morning show. I was at work. I'm listening. And I prayed. I asked God, what's the answer? And when the break came on, I would send her information if I could get some to throw her the ball. And she'd run like, any NFL player to get to the goal line with it if I got it. And God said, look at the local news. So I looked at the local news in Africa. Guess what? The wells were poisoned. Nobody had Ebola. They made it up. I sent that to Joyce, and while I was looking, I even found the cure. It's something to do with the rubber tree. There's a compound in rubber that people don't get Ebola. Nobody who worked on a rubber plantation ever got it.
Interesting.
The only other option might be something they sprayed the rubber trees with. But the answer was on the rubber farms. Nobody cared. Nobody wants to know the answer. They probably already know the answer. But the whole concept of this mind manipulation fell into the mud. And we stomped on it and moved on. And that's the power of communications, the power of radio. And, God bless us that we have that option. The big thing happening in Canada and in the United States is a policy called the Cloward-Piven strategy.
Oh, yes.
1966 by Columbia University sociologists.
Yeah, we talked about that numerous times on this show.
Overload the welfare system. Yep. Initiate cost of living to forced dependency, defund and demoralize law enforcement, reprogram education, normalize technocracy, erase private property through policy and debt, fracture society with politics, replace faith with family and state authority, implement total control through the money. And this is where Carney shines. He's Bank of International Settlements, central banker. He is a WEF man. So was Polyev, the conservative, and even the wingnut Singh for the NDP, he was WEF too. So you could have WEF, WEF for WEF. There's your choice. Pick one. And but they picked him because he is basically business partners with President Trump.
Well,
his
there
company,
was
Brookfield.
Well, there was a video. There was, I guess, they were having a meeting of the Parliament up there in Canada, and they were taking phone calls, and one guy called in and asked how many members are associated with the World Economic Forum. How many of them are working with Klaus Schwab? And then whoever it was that was running this whole thing says, "Well, we have a terrible connection here, and I'm sorry, but we can't carry on with this call." And so, I mean, I look at what's going on with the WEF, and of course, Charles, what's his name, Schwab has stepped down now.
Schwab.
Yeah, and I can't help but think that the policies are still going to be implemented. I go back to the truckers demonstration in Ottawa, and they had their bank accounts frozen, et cetera, et cetera. Wasn't that enough to start waking up Canadians to understand the globalist agenda and that they're being totally controlled and manipulated? What's it going to take for Canadians to open up their eyes and say, wait a second, this isn't right?
Well, it's written in the Declaration of Independence. Your founding fathers knew that when you get enough, you get to the point of give me liberty or give me death.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the stove set to give you a lot, but not enough that you get to the decision where you want liberty or death. It's only if you really know what they're doing, you arrive at that conclusion further or sooner, because you know what's coming for you. And so that was something I did on Power Hour too, as I read the Declaration. It's like, just read those words. They went through the same thing. Thomas Jefferson talked about the press. He says, better to have no press than the press that's giving you fed with lies. And he's quite correct. So I turn off corporate media. Sometimes people will say, whoa, did you hear what so-and-so said? I go, who's that? And okay, he could be like the brightest shining star in corporate media on some big station or something. I never heard of the guy, because I don't listen. I listen to Patriot Radio. If I'm not doing it, I want to listen to like-minded people who are giving me an honest, straight assessment. So, yeah, you're not pretty. Maybe you don't have a multi-million-dollar wardrobe and the makeup artists and all the rest of that stuff. I could care less. Are you telling me the truth or not? That's all that matters. The rest is a stage show to walk me into a trap. And Canadians were taken advantage of in a classic art of war or judo move. You use your opponent's weight against you. Donald Trump said at the outset he's taken over Canada and Greenland and all the rest by military force if necessary. But the art of war says the greatest victory is to win without firing a shot.
Right.
So we put our stooge in power, holds his company hold the mortgage for Trump Tower in New York City. I also did research to find out there's some kind of medical place in there that makes adrenochrome, by and large.
Wow.
And it's 666 for some strange reason, Fifth Avenue. It's just the luck of the draw. You get those numbers, 666.
Yeah, right.
Not saying with the devil or anything like that, but, it looks good. Trudeau had that on his license plate, like Papa Trudeau. So we're all cut from the same cloth. And then he's heavily invested into Elon Musk company, SpaceX, X, Tesla, and all that sort of thing, because he's completely against Trump and Elon Musk and everything about everything. But he puts all his money in there. He sits on the board of many corporations and companies. One of them's called Stripe, and Stripe is the big hookup to all these business associations. So he's a complete stranger to President Trump. Like, they're going to have a big bromance when they meet in Washington, let me tell you. And maybe they'll dance together and make gang signs and all the rest and send out a tweet about how happy they are. Every Canadian who voted for Carney voted for Trump, even though they say they hate him, because they're so stupid. Even Trump said, he's my pick. Well, then why are you voting for his pick? You're so brainwashed, so overwhelmed, you can't do that. And Poilievre was a lackluster candidate. Things I sent out, it's a wooden stake through the vampire's heart. You got him. He's dead. And he doesn't use it. So I even indirectly went through a radio station he was going to be on, because I'd appeared on that radio station before, and I had contact information there for the host who was going to interview him and the station manager. And I said, look, get him out. So the owner of the station even told him they had a soiree in the evening outside, and he even told him, you got to juice it up, son, because he's a really old guy, right? And he says, you got to set it on fire. It's time. And then the next day or two, he got into some of this material, but it was too late. so many people voted in early polls, it had no effect.
Yeah.
This is where you get Carney on TV, on the national debate. You drive the wooden stake in his heart. The big ones were Canada's on the verge of economic collapse. There's an RCMP intelligence report to that, and the Privy Council also put out a report to that. They're like the King's board governing Canada.
Uh-huh.
And they said, okay, economic collapse. Well, you got my attention, right? And I said, it's so bad, people will poach game from Crown lands. That you'll be roasting squirrels in the park. Okay, you go from super upper middle class lifestyle, nice home, maybe you don't have a butler and a chauffeur, but you're doing pretty fine. Now you're roasting squirrels over a 50-gallon drum in the park with everybody else. Like, come on. That ought to be a good sign of liberal economic policy. But it's in this thing I read before from Colombia that's what they want. They want to break the countries down.
Well,
they want you to be prostrate.
Well, let me ask you. Of course, here in the States, we look back at the 2020 election, and everybody now is starting to realize, yes, there was election fraud. Yes, they stole the election from Trump, and and Biden was put into place. Now, there are those that say, the white hats, the good guys, they let this happen. They let it happen so that America would be shown. You can tell people, but that doesn't work. You got to show them. And so now we got Biden in there for 4 years, the Biden-Harris administration, and America got to see the results of having a Democrat in the White House and the policies that were being implemented, the open borders, all the other stuff that went along with the Biden-Harris administration. So now we got Trump back in there. So my question to you is, do you think that the same methodology is being used by putting Carney in there so that the Canadian people can be shown? And hopefully we'll see what happens if everything falls apart up there in Canada. Do you think this is a strategy so that Trump can come in there and pick up the pieces? Do you think that's what's going on?
Well, that is the art of war. So if you put Carney in there, and it's just a certainty, Quebec is, after the next provincial election, the separatists are going to win a majority government. They say 1 year after we get elected, we're out of here. We're having another referendum. Alberta's already starting the paperwork for their referendum, and they lowered the threshold to get out. So you can see a breakup of Canada. And it's just like you're at sea when your ship breaks up. Whoever comes along rescues you. And guess who's next door? Not rocket science to figure that out. And I don't have a problem with that. Americans are my friends, my neighbors. We're more than that. We're Siamese twins, joined along what used to be the largest unguarded border in the world, and I was proud of that. Going to America was like walking across the street and going to my aunt's house.
Yeah.
And vice versa for anybody who wants to come the other way, because we're Siamese twins. And we think mostly the same way. We do things mostly the same way. And you wouldn't even really know the difference unless you looked up a flagpole and go, oh, gee, I stumbled across the border.
Yeah.
And you'd be happy for that.
Yeah, when I was
payday, my dad would take us across the border to go for some food on the Niagara River on the American side. And, there's no up against the wall, frisk everybody, and all that. It was just, where are you born? Where are you going? Okay, have fun.
Yeah, when I was a kid, my grandparents had a house in Buffalo, New York, and they had a cottage in Fort Erie, Canada. And when I was up visiting with them, there was no problem. You get in the car, you drive across the Peace Bridge, and you pull over, and they say, do you have anything to declare? And you say, no. And they say, okay, have a nice day. And that was it. And like you said, it was just, it's like going through a revolving door, no problem. But now it's a completely different atmosphere. So, well, let me ask you, long term, if you take the 30,000 or 40,000 foot view of what's going on between the U.S. and Canadian relations, do you think there's a possibility in the future that Canada or one of the provinces, possibly Alberta, who knows, do you think that there's a possibility that part of Canada or Canada itself will join with the United States? Do you think that's the long-term goal?
For Alberta, yes. They would love to join the United States. People I talk to from Alberta are very, 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 very big on doing that. And I can't blame them, really. Like, if I had to take a choice, do I got, Libtardiaville here or Carnistan? here in Canada with Carney in charge, or join the United States, like it's, hands down, join the United States. How many? I'm not a masochist, and I don't have Stockholm syndrome, so
okay.
I don't need any more. And when I talk to one of the other former Power Hour hosts all the time, Kevin Smith, we're just in Joyville. Come on down to Missouri, and bring the truck like the Beverly Hillbillies or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And it's the trouble is, I'd enjoy that because I have far much more in common with Americans than I do with Canadians. Canadians are they got a couple of screws loose about the world and how it works. They know nothing about their history. They know nothing about American history. They've been propagandized to hate freedom and liberty. And it's hard to fit in with a crowd like that. And
is it really that bad?
That makes it very different.
I mean,
Yes.
are Canadians really that brainwashed to hate liberty and hate freedom? They want an authoritarian government to tell them what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and where to do it? Is that what they really want?
Yes. I was even invited to a buddy's gun club, and so I started talking to a few people, and they're libtards, and I'm just shocked because when I do American radio, I'm talking Second Amendment stuff and freedom stuff and whatever, the right to self-defense. There was only one party that was interested in that, and that's the one I voted for. The Maxime Bernier's party is having the castle doctrine. You have a right to self-defense, and you do. It's an inane, natural right. Every creature on the planet Earth can defend itself. Before you go in the shark's mouth, you can give it a chop if you can or not, and you don't have to go down. And
well, it's getting pretty.
Canada.
It's getting pretty bad here. I saw that there was a bill in California that's moving forward that would make it illegal for you to defend yourself against a violent intrusion into your home. This is crazy. Somebody breaks into your home and threatens you with a machete or a gun. You're not allowed to defend yourself. I mean, this is insanity. I really don't understand how these liberal Democrats can even justify this. Another example is the Laken Riley Act that Trump signed into law, and of course, not signed into law. They voted on it, and not one Democrat voted for this thing. And this is basically saying that if an illegal alien rapes or murders or assaults somebody, they get deported immediately. And the Democrats don't want that to happen. Not one Democrat voted for that. And the Democrats also, they're putting a lawsuit against RFK Jr. because he wants to investigate the origins and causes of autism. And the liberal Democrats are suing him for that. No, you can't look into that. I mean, this is craziness. And from what you're telling me, the same craziness is going on north of the border. What do we do with these people? How do you wake them up?
Unfortunately, that's in the Declaration, too. When you get it long enough and hard enough that you can't take it anymore and you prefer to die, you'll fight for liberty. And it may take very much that much. The right to bear arms didn't come from the United States. You kind of assume that, but they took it from somewhere else. They took it from the British Bill of Rights in 1683. And that Bill of Rights was passed after the Inquisition. So after metal objects are shoved in your body, or you're put on the rack and made 2 feet taller, or all your bones are broken and you're kicked around and you're starved and deprived, tortured in manners that you couldn't even begin to dream about, unless you're a psychopath, you know what? The right to bear arms isn't such a bad thing after all, eh, boys?
Yeah, right. Well, I got to tell you, years and years ago, when I was a liberal Democrat, and I remember when John Lennon was assassinated, the New York Times had a full-page ad with endorsements from all these Hollywood actors and rock stars, etc., to basically ban all guns, get all the guns out of the hands of the American people. And I was right behind that. And then one day I saw a bumper sticker, and it said, "Those who beat their guns into plows will plow for those who didn't." And that was attributed to Thomas Jefferson. And that sort of was the beginning of my turnaround.
And if John Lennon had a gun and he knew how to use it, he wouldn't be dead.
That's true. You know, I was thinking about that the other day. What if John Lennon hadn't been assassinated? I wonder what kind of world this would be, because he was a huge, you want to talk about social influencer. Oh my gosh. You know, I mean, he was right at the top. And I could understand why the powers
that they killed him.
That's exactly why they killed him. As a matter of fact, when the Beatles did All You Need Is Love on live television, that was broadcast all over the world. And for the first time in history, the Beatles had more attention than any political or religious leader to date. And that scared the holy horse hockey out of these people. They realized how much power that he had.
Especially Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
Yes. He got a man out of jail by singing a song.
Yeah, that's right.
No lawyers, no appeal courts. Just sang the song, they let him go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the power he had. He could stop the world from spinning or spin it in another direction. And I doubt we'd see the wars we're seeing now, today, if he was still alive. McCartney's like a waste of space.
Yeah.
But John Lennon is, it's a shame the young people don't know or maybe can't connect to that time. Lady Diana was the same thing, too. She could carry a lot of sway. They kill her. Anybody who could do that, they kill him. And, he was set up. It was a, state-sponsored assassination, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
The doorman at the Dakota was an operative for the Bay of Pigs invasion, so CIA-da. And, he was just lured and walked into the ambush, and I don't hold Yoko Ono off the hook. A typical homicide, you look at the wife first.
Mm-hmm.
Who had the most to gain? Bono. Well, that's a vast fortune, especially after he's dead. Did you lure him into that? And the other guy's just the patsy. Here, sit down on the curb, look at the big white rabbit in the sky, drop the gun beside him, and he did it,
Yeah, well, Mark David Chapman, I read a book, it was called Who Killed John Lennon? It was written by a guy named Fenton Bresler, and he carried the background, or covered the background of Mark David Chapman, and apparently he was a CIA MK Ultra asset. So that's a real interesting story. Anyway, I just noticed the clock, and we're coming down to the wire here. George, is there something that you'd like to share with the audience before we finish up the broadcast? I mean, you have a website or a book?
Well, quickly, there was a report, open letter, written to Carney by RCMP intelligence sergeant Mary Field, and former city cop, and advising them that 9 of their top cabinet ministers are Chinese agents.
What?
And that includes all the hoi polloi of his cabinet. Freeland, the deputy prime minister, they're all on the hook of the Chinese Communist Party. And this was another wooden stake through the heart that Polyev didn't use on the debate. And, I've been saying that, but they proved it because they've got evidence to this effect. And I was just using conjecture and saying that's the only alternative you can have. And why do you have that? Because the Chinese infiltration of Canada can make a day where China invades down both coasts of the United States and takes them over. That's their policy.
So who's controlling?
2005.
So who's controlling Canada? Is it China or is it the World Economic Forum?
They're like hand in glove. Anything for totalitarianism, and it's like you got a mob syndicate. They fight over it after it's over. But China is heavily infiltrated into Canada, rigging elections, rigging votes. And this is a bad fight.
Well, I hate to do it. George, we're flat out of time. The music's playing. Oh, my gosh. We're going to have to wrap this up. Anyway, George, thank you so much for joining me on today's show. We'll have to talk after the show. I appreciate your input here and helping us sort out what's going on north of the border there in Canada. All right, campers, the weekend is upon us, so please be safe, be free, stay in prayer. We're going to have to call on our higher power and God Almighty to sort all this stuff out because we can't do it on our own. All right, that said, like I said, be safe, be free, and I will be back on Monday with more of the news they hope and pray you never hear. This is vonKleist, and please visit our website, the WTF Reports, and do some business with our sponsors. God bless you all, and I'll see you on Monday.